Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this first webinar that has been organized by a group of researchers and lecturers from Politecnico di Torino and Università di Torino. My name is Patrizia Lombardi, and together with me today we will share with Marco Guerzoni this first webinar relating to the project Turin 2030, Challenging the Future. Why and what it is about? Well, this project is about the development of 6 different webinars that will be developed between today and March. Each webinar will focus on a specific topic relating to Turin, relating to the challenge that this metropolitan area is facing from now to 2030. Each webinar will be followed by a multi-stakeholder discussion where the focus will be the development of alternative scenarios for the resolution of the challenge that we discuss. It is an experimental project. It is based on scientific and technical forecasting, foresight methodologies. And because of this, we are supported by a group of technical experts in the field of foresighting. Well, this is the first webinar, and we decided to focus on specifically the remanufacturing challenge that Turin as a metropolitan area may face in the future. And we wanted specifically this project, because we think that Turin, with the great history, the great past of industrialization, the great architectonical and territorial powerful that can involve, well, this forward-looking of 2030 can provide opportunities for rethinking our past, connecting with the present and foresighting the future. We wanted this Torino 2030 project, especially because we think that as universities, we play a specific role that is of serving and civil role of supporting our community in this trajectory. So we decided during the lockdown to starting to discuss these issues, and we decided to put forward this implementing this project. It is a study that is based on multidisciplinary field, because the group of people that I'm going to present in a minute is really coming from different discipline, different expertise. And the topic that we are going to discuss in the next 5 months are very challenging, because they try to envisioning possible future scenarios in relation to strengths and weaknesses of the present situation. So, for instance, next month we will discuss the challenging possible systemic interaction among metropolitan area and the specific mountain and geographical and social economical situation that is a part of the metropolitan area of Turin. In December, we will focus on spaces and urban spaces and inclusion of citizens. So this important correlation among social and morphological aspect as well, and the living situation as well. In January, there will be a focus on the public and common goods that are the public spaces. So specific attention will be paid to the urban areas, how they are the moment, how citizen and administration can take a role in including this special aspect into the living and governance issues. And in February, there will be a specific focus on environmental issues and the great challenge of the urban spaces in relation to the climate change, to the climate crisis that we are facing. And finally, in March, we will face the specific topic. We will handle the topic relating to the cultural production and performing art, where Turin is very rich on this. So there are different topics, different webinar, and each webinar is followed after a couple of weeks by a multi-stakeholder expert roundtable discussion. So the webinar specifically focus on framing the problem, while the table will provide possible future alternatives, and it is also moderated and chaired and supported by experts in the field. So here we are in the first webinar. Each webinar includes both two internal experts from the two universities and two external experts. And therefore, we will have great speakers today, which I thank personally. The webinar is chaired and managed by two of the group of initial people that have designed this project, Torino 2030. And today with me is the colleague Marco Guerzoni that I invited to appear, while the other expert and colleagues that will support and chair the next webinar are Filippo Barbera, together with Antonio De Rossi. Then there will be Andrea Bocco and Alessandra Quarta. We will have also Marco Guerzoni and Giovanni Semi, Paolo Mellano, and I think I have mentioned all, together with myself. And here I thank you for your attention for my short introduction. I hope to have provided an overview that is not really in detail, but this is an ongoing project. And I thank Marco for the introduction to this today webinar and to our guest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrizia. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and sharing with you this webinar. And before introducing our distinguished guest, let me take a brief moment to give a general perspective on what we're doing today. As you were saying, today and the next webinars as well, today it's about a city, its connection, its industry, the laborious people, their competence. And you all know, sometimes fate and gods are favorable and the sailormen just keep the courses, but in some other time we face bad wind, we are in time of crisis, and together with the group we thought that it's not very much about reinventing a city, but all together deciding where we want to go. So today it's about the economic crisis of the city of Turin, and how can we create a vision and decide all together the new path that we would like to steer. In many science, this is almost obvious. In engineering, architecture, in management, we all know we need a plan if you have a problem. In economics, however, sometimes there is this myth that economy can guide itself through some magical mechanism of markets. Well, the bad news is that it's not true, that we need some form of coordination of public and private investment, of entrepreneurial decision. But the good news is that altogether we can decide where we want to go and how we want to restructure our economy. Well, today we would like to contribute to this discussion and giving some idea about where Turin is and where we would like to go. So, Back to the Future is the title of the seminar. Why is that? Well, Turin comes from a glorious past of an industrialized city. Its manufacturing industry have been worldwide well known for the quality of the products, for the competence and the skills of the workers. As in many other countries, we observe a decline in manufacturing already starting in the 70s of the last century. And in the 80s, the crisis of Turin was already evident. Since then, we have experienced an increasing unemployment rate, despite the population of the city is declining. The value of property is also declining. There are many symptoms that now are evident that we are in a situation of crisis. Of course, not everything is bad, and Turin, as we all know, is also some strength. In Turin, there are two first-tier academic institutions, such as the university and the polytechnic, which are hosting this webinar series. The new Italian Institute for Artificial Intelligence will soon be placed in Turin, and so on and so forth. So the idea is whether we can or where we should go, not reinventing the city, but based on what we have. So we still have a manufacturing base that we would like to renovate, but of course we don't want to go back in the past. We want to think of the new manufacturing system and maybe thinking on how we can try to melt these strengths in manufacturing that are still around with the new opportunity of the cities. So I'm very happy that 4 distinguished guests join us today to discuss this. Let me first start with our, let's call them external guests, external because they're not from Turin, and they are Maria Savona, who is professor in innovation and evolutionary economics at SPRU, Sussex University, and also professor in Rome at Lewis in applied economics. And Maria has been working for many years on trying to explain the reason and the effect of structural change of region and countries. So I thank you, Maria, for joining us, because I think that your expertise can help us.
Thank you, Marco.
You're welcome. The second external guest is Frank Neshka, who is a research director at the Growth Lab at the Harvard University, who's also spent many years in trying to understand structural change and how different part of the economy can be complementary or not, and can help in steering a process of development over time. One reason this seminar is in English, because we really wanted to go around and look in the world where we could find the best experts to discuss this. But of course, we also need someone expert on the city of Turin itself to tell us a little bit where we are and how things look like. And for this reason, I would like to thank Giuseppe Cellato and Aldo Geuna. Giuseppe Cellato is a professor at the Polytechnique and is an expert in innovation and entrepreneurship, while Aldo Geuna is a professor at the University of Turin, and he has been widely studying innovative local system, the role of university, and how university and local firms can and might interact to contribute to the innovative ecosystem of a place. So I don't want to steal more time to the speaker. The webinar is organized as follows. In the first part, the internal speaker, Giuseppe Cellato and Aldo Geuna, will sketch in a few minutes the situation of Turin, and then we will have some time for questions. And then we are looking forward to hear from Frank Neshka and Maria Savona their view on what we are discussing, and then we will have time for further questions and wrapping up a little bit the discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for joining this live stream, and I leave the floor to Giuseppe Cellato. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. And thanks to all the organizers of the meeting for inviting me. I'm going to share a few slides here. All right. Well, good. Hope you can hear me properly. So my objective here is, in a sense, to try to set the ground for the discussion and the remaining part of the seminar. And I will do this starting with some data in order to put in context a bit the specific condition of the local metropolitan areas, doing also some comparison. In particular, I will also have a focus on the theme of innovation and the evolution in time of what we call, in our field of study, the knowledge bases, the skills that are present locally. Finally, I'll say something, mostly questions in this case, about what public policies should be put in place over a 10-year perspective. In a minute, I will start with the data. Saying right before that we are using the most recent data, but still these are data that belongs to a pre-COVID phase of the world, and so in this sense we have to look at this data and trying to take into consideration also as much this data will be affected in the future by what is happening today. So we are going to talk about manufacturing, and in particular the concept of reindustrialization. A good starting point is to compare the local metropolitan areas with other cities in Europe. And in particular, in this slide, you see the composition of gross value added for selected cities. And the share that you're seeing here is the incidence of gross value added related to industry in general and manufacturing in particular. So you see, we are starting from comparing Turin with other city, still with a considerable fraction of value added generated by the area of manufacturing. We are not in a case like, I don't know, Manchester, Edinburgh, other cities in the UK that have experienced a significant contraction of the gross value added related to manufacturing. Other German metropolitan areas like Munich and Stuttgart, for example, you see are experiencing a growth trend in recent years. Here we are comparing year 2000, 2010, and 2017. In a sense, these can be potential benchmarks to some extent of the local area. This is a very broad concept, gross value added. Then we can have a look at a different perspective. What you see here is a sample of companies located in the metropolitan area of Turin. In particular, we have selected all the balance sheet data for all the companies that had in fiscal year 2019, just like last year, so very recent data. Here we have only the companies with a minimum level of revenues of 1 million euros. So we have large companies as well as small companies. We are just excluding really micro firms. If we look at the distribution just by counting the number of firms, the broad manufacturing sector accounts for 33% of all the companies with more than 1 million euros. If we look at these companies not by simply counting them, but rather by pooling the total revenues of last year, the manufacturing sector accounts for 54% of the overall sample, which is, I believe, a very important number. Finally, if we look at this sample in terms of employees, taken again just from balance sheet data, manufacturing accounts for 43% within this sample. My first insights from this data is that manufacturing is still there, is a very important component of the local economy. But behind this number, we have to be aware of the presence of a significant heterogeneity in these firms. A subset of them has already gone through the process of this digitalization, transformation of the business. Some of them are fully internationalized, and they have also experienced a diversification in terms of customers, no longer strictly tied to a specific local supply chain system. But these companies, unfortunately, at least in my view, represent a subset. I'm not giving you a specific share, that is quite difficult to be estimated, but probably they are not the majority. So there is our problem. If we break down more on a finer grain, let's say, manufacturing, so now we are focusing just on that subset of firms that have more than 1 million euro of turnover and are working in are classified, let's say, in manufacturing. This is the distribution among subsectors, and still last year the large majority of them are in the fabrication of metal products, machinery, motor vehicles, rubber, plastics, and products, and to a smaller extent later on food products or manufacturing of electronic components. So there is still this prevalence of manufacturing oriented towards more industrial application, fabrication of metal products, machinery, and vehicles. if we try to take a quite different perspective, not just counting firms or looking at their turnover in recent year, but rather we look at what we call knowledge bases. Approximating, measuring knowledge bases is quite difficult. One possibility is to use patent application, and this is what you see in these slides. Patents have some weaknesses in terms of measuring innovation capabilities. We know, for example, they are not very good at capturing innovation in the service sector, but for manufacturing they can tell us something. What you see here is the decomposition of the portfolio of European patents filed by companies, more generally by applicants. So here we have also universities or public research institutions located in the Turin metropolitan area, back from the early 90s to more recent years. Unfortunately, we cannot have more recent data. We have to stop the observation about 4 years ago. But this trend tells us something. There has been a decrease, a slight decrease, you say, in patents related to transportation, from 34% back in the 90s to 27% now. The other trend that can be read is an increase in the sector of what is called human necessities, that includes pharmaceutical products, biotechnology, biomedical solutions. Now, in the next slide, basically, what I do is I take the composition of technological portfolios of local firms in the last year, 2012 to 2016, and I compare this with other selected cities and try to comment on what is happening here compared to what is happening in other areas. So you have Turin on the extreme right of these slides, and other cities like Manchester, Munich, or Stuttgart. My key point about these slides is the following. If you compare, for example, Turin and Stuttgart, two cities that have, in terms of industrial history, quite a number of commonalities in terms of specialization, you see that the portfolio, in the case of Stuttgart, for example, see a larger fraction of patents and innovation capabilities in the areas of electricity and physics compared to Turin. Those are areas very much related to the ICT sector and the digital industry, more broadly speaking. And I believe that this change, this evolution in the case of Stuttgart, you can observe also a bit in the case of Munich, for example, gives us a clear insight of the fact that those metropolitan areas are moving toward a reframing of the set of skills that is more oriented to the recombination of traditional, more mechanical type of engineering and software, digital solution, more broadly ICT technologies. Then I have a few slides, because here in this we are talking about a city, but we need to be aware of the fact that a city or metropolitan area is located within a broader regional context. So it's also important to have this perspective and not to treat a geographical location as isolated from the context in all our future reflection about the future of the city. The latest available data comes from the Regional Innovation Scoreboard that is done by the European Commission, and it's an instrument that pulls together a number of different indicators that are related to innovation. So this is the map of Europe. Turin is located where we know, and it belongs to a broader, let's say, macro region of northern Italy. From this, and it's classified here as just a moderate innovator, as a regional innovation system. It's clear from this map that there are what we call in economics country fixed effects, or country specificities. And we need to take into consideration this very clearly in imagining what are the optimal policy scales and the potential for supporting the change, even of our local economic system. Trying to dig a bit into the data that are made by a large number of indicators. Here you have a selection of them. So suppose the median region in Europe has a score of 100 on this dimension. This is the situation for the broader region where Turin is located. There are some areas in which the region is outperforming the median European level, and some region which we stay below the 100 threshold, indicating a non-optimal performance, I would say. Looking at a single region is not that easy, since I've been mentioning before the northern Italy macro region. I think it's important to try to do a comparison, at least, with other macro region in northern Italy. And here I will pick just a few numbers out of this slide. The first one is about a relatively good performance still in terms of employment in medium and high-tech manufacturing compared to other regions. But on the other side, we see a problem, for example, related to innovative SMEs collaborating with others, in general, with respect to the average, let's say, European region, and more specifically, even when we compare with Lombardy, for example. Just so that's a key point that probably shed the light on the importance of supporting a better integration of SMEs within other players that are locally present. There is another red digit in this table that concerns the population with tertiary education. You see there at the bottom. The score is quite low, declaring the fact that despite the fact that we have important universities here, there might be still a shortage of high-skilled person to be inserted in the economic system. This is just, I know, a brief overview about the broader regional system, looking specifically at the innovation performance. At the European level, there is also another instrument that measures competitiveness of different territories, still at the regional level, and this is the map. Again, we see a country effect, clearly, but in this case, if we focus on northern Italy, we see for the Turin area a lower performance, for example, compared to Lombardy or the other region, Emilia-Romagna. In this indicator, compared to the previous one on the regional innovation scoreboard, also infrastructures, local infrastructure play a role. They have a weight in defining this score. Hence, we need, in my view, to reflect carefully while thinking about the future of manufacturing, also on the dimension of local infrastructure, technological infrastructure, communication, wideband access. And we are talking about the transformation of the hopeful transformation of the manufacturing sectors. I believe we should focus our attention on two dimensions of change. One that is more related on digital transformation, improvement in productivity, process innovation, what we call servitization, so the inclusion in the offer of the company, not only of products, but also related services. But this is one dimension of transformation. The other one that requires different types of intervention has to do, in my view, with a more radical product innovation and technological diversification. This second one involves the integration within companies of new skills, and in most of the cases also recombination of knowledge coming from different domains. It's a more difficult type of change for the firms compared to the idea of simply a digital transformation connected to the improvement in productivity. Then that's my first question mark. What are the channels, the available channels that we have for the supporting both type of transformation that I'm mentioning in these slides? Clearly, we know university can play a role, training institution can play a role, centers for applied research and technology transfer, and I'm mentioning here that I believe this is very important for the local system, FDI, foreign direct investment, and the role of corporates. We also have to keep in mind the fact that the production structure locally is mostly represented by SMEs rather than large corporates. Out of all these channels, I will briefly discuss in a minute. I will pick one, which is the university, the role of the university in supporting the transformation of the local knowledge base. I'm doing this showing you a couple of slides from some recent work I'm doing with colleagues here at Polytechnic di Torino. These are studies supported by the European Patent Office, the academic research program. We are just completing this research. So what have we done? We have looked into 260 metropolitan areas, or let's call them nuts-free, so what we call a provincia in Italy, or subland in Germany. And we have looked at the technological specialization of the local companies and the technological specialization of the university system located in the same area. And we asked ourselves, what is the distance between these two portfolios of activities, and how much this distance is changing? Do we observe a divergence process or a convergence process? And so in these slides, all the little dots that you see are single areas, metropolitan areas in Europe, and there is Turin. The closer you are to the origin of the axis, the more, let's say, overlapping are the portfolios of technologies of local firms and innovation activities related to the local university system. Torino is there. We observe Torino in a set of local regions with a good level of similarity and a convergence process, because we are below the 45 degrees line. Here we are comparing years 2003 to 2008 and years 2009, 2014. There is a process of convergence. Then we also ask ourselves, this process of convergence is a good thing, probably, but what about the capability of the local area to enter new technologies, to add new competencies locally? Now, I'm not entering very much into detail on the modeling of the data. I'll just try to explain a final slide here. So suppose in this slide, again, we have all the specific areas in Europe, 260 cities, let's say. And over the years, we can have a convergent or a divergent process in terms of technological specialization. And this process can be led, the entry into new technology, mostly by the university or by the local industry. So is it first the university entering in new sectors, and then the industry is subsequently developing a specialization into that field or vice versa. Turing is located where you see, so in the end we observe quite a convergent process during the year and an exploratory role, a leading role of university in bringing new knowledge locally that has been followed by the local industry. So this is my last slide. In my view, the emerging technological trajectories, we all know them, in most of the manufacturing areas involve some type of recombination of knowledge from different domains. But such process requires financial and managerial and organizational models that unfortunately are hardly to be achieved by SMEs that have limited capabilities by definition to internalize external knowledge and recombine such knowledge within the boundaries of the firms. This raises a number of concerns and possible question for our guests and for the discussion that is starting in a minute. So the question what is in this process the role of technology transfer organization? What is the role of human capital? Should we focus mostly on tech transfer or human capital improvement? Here I mentioned a concept, the anchor tenant role of large firms in technological transfer process. Should we just focus on attracting here big players because it's just through big players that this transformation of manufacturing can take place? Finally, a picture. The last question is about startups. I work in the field of entrepreneurship, and I not only theoretically as a researcher, but also practically working with many startups in my professional activity. I believe they can play a role. Probably not they are not the key role, but they can play a role in bringing this technological combination between different skills within medium-sized firms in an open innovation, let's say, approach. So I'm closing with questions, but I'll be free, be very happy, let's say, to discuss the data and these insights with you.
Thank you very much, Beppe. Your presentation is full of insights, and in this question, I think, are the right tools to think about the future. Now we have time for 1-2 questions from the audience, if any. So, if you have any question, just type it on your screen. And I wait a few seconds. If there are not any question, we might skip to Aldo Geuna, the next presenter. But in case, if while Aldo is discussing, a question for Beppe Scellato comes in your mind, please feel free in the next time slot for question to ask question to both the internal expert. So Aldo, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. I leave the floor to you, and I'm really looking forward to listen to your presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. You can hear my voice. Okay, so
excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, perfect now.
Yeah, it's okay. Wonderful, because I just see the PowerPoints. Beppe gave a very detailed description of where Torino is, where manufacturing in Torino is, and offer a set of questions and proposals for the future. I'm taking a slightly different approach, and actually I'm trying in the first part of my presentation to ask or to answer to the question is where Torino will be in 30 years. It will very much depend on from where Torino is coming. So I really think that the heritage of the city, the path dependence in the economic development of the city will shape, will constrain, will guide where the city itself will be. So when I was starting to prepare this presentation, I was trying to figure out which number can I give, as I have 10, 15 minutes to go through 120 years of manufacturing development. And then I turn out to a very simple number, actually, but I think is very is able to capture very well economic development. So this is population. This is the graph from Istad, 1861 to 2011. And what is the story behind this graph? Is the story of manufacturing development of the city of Torino. So you can really see the 18, 19, 19, 91, 1930, the first important growth. The second after the Second World War, 1951, with the Italian miracle. And then 70s, the city reached 1.2 million. And then the slowdown. The slowdown means the city is getting less able to attract people. And actually there is a stability and then an important slowdown. The slowdown fades away a bit in 2001 onwards. So if you look at this graph, tells you the story of a city that has been successful for let's say 100 years in attracting population. It's been a pole of attraction, and this success has been connected with manufacturing and with economic development. If you look at the last 20 years, the story is slightly different. So in 2002, the population reached the number of 860, and it's equivalent to the middle 50, by the way. And then there is a takeoff again. There is a takeoff again, 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I will tell the Olympics, fundamentally the transformation. I will argue that there has been a transformation in this city. And then we see again a decrease in population. So there is a rebound. So the city has actually found a way in the last 20 years to attract again population, to grow again. So not only to slow down the decrease in population, but to attract population again. But then after 11 and 12, population numbers are going down again. So let me try then associated to this number a very, very quick, super brief history and make a few points that then are for me useful to conclude the presentation in where we will be in 30 years' time. So automobile, second industrial revolution, growth of the city. Torino is very much the Italian Detroit. There are actually two cities in the world, that is Torino and Detroit, that were so dependent, in which automobile was so important. 50s, 60s, actually, there was a major miss. Let me include Ivrea within the Torino metropolitan city, and I'm arguing that in that period, the Olivetti dream in computer was killed, was dead. Olivetti was able to develop the mainframe a few years behind the US, but then with the death of Olivetti, this project was sold out. And then again, there is an attempt in the 60s with La Perotino by someone considered the first laptop before Californian laptops. But again, also the effort was killed. Yes, Olivetti later on starts again to produce computers, but fundamentally the knowledge base of the company in computer making was not supported and did not develop. Telecom, there was, of course, SIPSTED and then XELT. XELT is a research center of telecom, so a bit better. But fundamentally, I'm arguing that Torino was not able to enter in the third industrial revolution. Torino was, and somehow still is, very much a second industrial revolution city. ICTs, and then later on in the 80s, software really did not develop well in this city. So what has happened in the 80s and 90s is what I'm arguing is the first manufacturing transformation. Sometimes we are concerned about unemployment nowadays, but that story is the past of Torino. If you look at the decrease of population number I showed you, that decrease is associated with a significant deindustrialization, automation, outsourcing, and this trend. To give you a very simple example, Fiat in 1979 had about 100,000 blue collar. In 1999 at about 10,000. There is not one, it's 10, sorry. So from 100,000 to 10,000 in about 20 years. So the first manufacturing transformation is an history of the 1980s and 1990s. Rise, significant reduction of population. The city tries to reinvent itself and tries to diversify. There is an attempt, as I said, on telecom and software, the telecom software cluster, but I would argue that it did not flourish, or it did flourish much, much less. So it did develop a bit, but compared to other cities around the world, or even compared to Milano, that's not an area of strength. Torino rediscovered itself, however, as a royal city, as a beautiful city, a forgotten beautiful city, a city with a lot of treasures, a city with a lot of museum that got created, and successfully managed to reinvent itself, pushing on tourism and culture. So the Olympic game, if you look back at the data, is very much consistent. Look at the increase of population on the 2006 Olympic game. The Olympic game is the completion of a transformation, of a diversification. The argument here, Torino is not Detroit. Detroit failed. A complete area of Detroit are inhabited. Population left, went away. The drop of population of Detroit has been much more significant than Torino. So Torino managed to do a first transformation, managed to start a diversification. I would argue that that's not enough. So since the Great Recession, 2007-2008, macroeconomic national problem, of course. So that means very little space for public intervention, and a negative cycle started. I mean, I don't have time to argue about this negative cycle. Marco has already talked a bit about it. Is our concern, is the concern of this series of webinars. But the point I want to make is culture and tourism, not enough to it. You don't transform a city of 1 million inhabitants in a touristic city. There is no enough work there for 1 million inhabitants. There has been also through the high-speed train connection, and also through a very successful policy action of Milan, an attraction of MNEs from Turin to Milan. So there has been a move out of Turin. Losing MNEs is an important indicator of the city becoming less attractive, is an important indication of losing human capital, is an important indication of losing international people, is an important indication of losing potential for salaries. If you're a very talented young worker, you will go to Milan because MNEs are there, and therefore you have potential for higher salary. You will not stay in Milan. So it's a major problem when a city starts to lose MNEs. Third, extremely important, again, compared to Milan, city transformation and construction slowdown. If you look at Milan of 15 years ago and you look at Milan of nowadays, it's really another city. Torino has done the transformation, again, not to be too negative on Torino, in the previous wave, but then from 2007 onwards, very little. I mean, the story of the skyscrapers is a typical example. In the project developed 20, 30 years ago, there were various skyscrapers to be built in Torino, and we ended up with one that is used, and the second one, the one of the region that is not yet used. However, I don't want to be too much negative. I want to just highlight a few points. And then Beppe showed that manufacturing is still important. Attention here, manufacturing really very much means machinery, metal products, and vehicle. In the data of Beppe, that was about 50 to 60%. So there is excellent in this city, in this region. The typical example I'm giving is what we call pocket multinational. Prima industria is the example. So mid-sized companies that have managed to grow and have acquired companies abroad, they are multinational but of small size, and we have a few cases. Of course, we have Lavazza in the more food industry. Fiat, after various problems, has managed to, with the FCA agreement, survive and proceed. And in Torino, there is production of high-end vehicles and extremely important, I think, production of the new electric vehicles. Very curious to know what is going to happen there. And as pointed out by Beppe, innovation R&D statistics and innovation R&D effort is still quite high. Those scoreboards that we have seen, if you take 10 years ago, Piemonte was in the mid-high. Now we are in the mid, so there is, however, an indication of slowdown. But still, there is a lot of innovation going on in this city, in this region, and the R&D effort is still high. Attention, the region GDP has been flat for a lot of years, so a stable R&D means with a decreasing GDP actually means that the expenditure in R&D have been decreasing. Still, there is the region in Italy with the highest R&D spending. Another strength has been the arrival, the starting of the competence center in digital manufacturing. I would argue that covers better the mechanical part, connected to the history of the city, is an organization there for knowledge transfer, somehow trying to respond to the question posed by Beppe. Third, there is a good university system. Both the Polytechnic and the University of Torino in the last 10 years have shown a positive student enrollment in an overall trend of decreased student enrollment. That means that they've been able to attract students from Italy and from abroad, internationalizing their student population. They are performing well in terms of research. So what does it mean this in terms, we don't care somehow in scientific terms, we care in economic terms, is attraction of talents. Is attraction of talents in the terms of students and also researcher, and is potential for startup, what Beppe was talking about. It has a role in the city. Usually when we speak of startup, I'm saying Torino is not bad, actually. We have a decent number of startups. Unfortunately, the part of capital, venture, angels, and so on and so forth is a bit weak. So innovation starts here and then moves to Milan and then probably used to move to London and to California. Still, innovation is present, and that's mean the talent, young people, young researchers that can contribute to new companies. Finally, and important to recognize is good life. Is a good sized city. It's about 1 million. You have theater, you have cinema, you have whatever you may want. Services are not bad. Public transport is not bad relative to a lot of US cities. It is great, but even relative to a lot of UK cities is not bad. Price quality comparison. Yes, house prices is going down, so it's not good. On the other side, the price quality comparison of, for example, again with Milan or with certain cities in Germany is pretty good for Torino. So it's a good city. There is a problem of pollution, clear. I don't have time. One of the policy I would argue here would be a radical push for green transport, where means a radical transformation of the city. Started a bit during the COVID. I think this is one of the good things of COVID, actually. But transforming this city, making it even more attractive, so make it bicycle friendly would be a major plus. And then poor marketing is an issue, in the sense that Milan, one of the reasons I think Milan has been successful in the last 10 years, that has been able to communicate in Italy and abroad that Milano was an attractive city. Where to live, where to do business, where to locate the multinational. Torino has been less good in doing this. I really think that for a large part of the population, depending on the age cohort, Torino is a better place where to live than Milan, but we are not good in communicating that. So what are the challenges to this picture of weaknesses and strength? Manufacturing, especially mechanical vehicle cutting and so on and so forth, is there. Resilience is there, but the question is for how long? COVID, liquidity, another issue are there, cutting the future of mid-small companies. So the window of opportunity I would define is not too large to act. I think is actually closing. So there is resilience, but I'm afraid it's not going to last long. Unfortunately, these industries are traditional industries, as argued by Marco. So not high potential of growth there. So there is a need of diversification. The first attempt of diversifying towards telecom ICT, a bit of failure, culture, tourism, success has not been enough. So remaining needs of diversification, I would argue with the last slides, of related diversification. Third is a major challenge is a productivity gap, in the sense that we do have the small pocket multinational. We do have companies, the top 2, 3, 4% in the productivity ladder that are highly performance in terms of productivity, therefore in terms of innovation, therefore in terms of growth. But then the gap between the top 3, the top 5, and the following, and the 10 and the 20, has become larger. So what does it mean? It means that there is a major problem of knowledge deployment in SMEs and knowledge diffusion. Productivity increase is driven by innovation, so diffusion of new knowledge, of new technologies. If the productivity gap is increasing, it means that mid-size, because I'm saying 10% productivity, so mid-size and small-size companies are not deploying any longer as they used to be. So there is a problem, there is a challenge of a new governance of knowledge transfer. This city, this region has worked well in the second industrial revolution when Fiat was the king, where there was a very well-structured pyramidal knowledge transfer system and all the supply chain of Fiat that was in a certain moment, remember the Detroit of Italy, was accounting for a really large part of the GDP of the city, meant that the practice in a large company, they were percolating, innovation in a large company was percolating through the system. Fiat is not any longer the king. We really need to rethink the system and move away from the pyramidal structure to, I would argue, more horizontal structure. So now let's spend the next 3 to 5 minutes probably on digital manufacturing to make a point and then to conclude this presentation, because that's the focus of where we will be in 30 years depend on the transformation of digital manufacturing. I think the literature, both academic and on the newspaper, is far too focused on artificial intelligence. What the hell is artificial intelligence? I don't know, or a lot of people I think that they don't know, and the possible negative on unemployment. There are no more blue collars in Torino. Fundamentally, I'm exaggerating a bit. So that's not the concern. So I really think here that there is a possible of a return to the future on local competences transformed. So we need to then, therefore, to clarify what exactly digital manufacturing is and if there are local competences. I think there are 4 major building blocks. It's not artificial intelligence, it's actually robots, sensors, so the hardware part, algorithms, that sometimes refers to artificial intelligence, and information systems, so the software part. You need the hardware part to collect the data, to elaborate the data, and then to produce and manage. The simulator that enables a supply chain, a digital supply chain, is the result of algorithm information, and then sensors, and then robots. So Torino is not so bad in the hard component. The example is Comau. Comau is the second largest robotic company in Europe after KUKA. Comau is fully owned by Fiat. We don't know if Fiat wants to sell it or not, but it's another discussion. This still is there. Sensor, we have something. So again, my argument here is Torino is probably weak on the software part rather than on the hardware part. So what do we need to do? Or my feedback to this discussion of this series of webinar. So increase digital adoption. That I think is the most important action. And that means technological and organizational transformation. The relaunch of industrial policy in Italy has been important. Industry 4.0, the calendar industrial policy a few years ago, but I'm afraid meant a lot of investment in technology rather than organizational transformation. We know from the studies of the 80s and 90s that when computers arrived in company and organization were not transformed, productivity increase was not there. So we learn in the field that is really radical technological change requires a radical organizational change. So how do we do this? Governance of knowledge transfer, improve absorptive capacity of SMEs. There are various actions. I don't have time. I'm just pushing forward two. I have suggested a few years ago, and I think they are still important nowadays. So this new National Artificial Intelligence Center, I3A, I'm very happy to that has been assigned to Torino in September. This was one suggestion that we put out in 2017. Attention, however, to what it will be. The argument here is that we do not need another basic research center. University, Polytechnico are doing their job in that area. What is missing is governance of knowledge transfer. So we really need to learn from the experience abroad. And here the typical example given in Italy and in other countries is actually the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, created in the 50s, 60s, and that as a aim, knowledge transfer. That does not mean that it does only development research, applied research. Actually, you have to do basic research to be able to transfer knowledge, because you have to be able to understand basic research, to talk to academic researchers, then to be able to transform that and understand the need of business and link it to communities. Catapult in the UK were created about 5, 6, 7 years ago, copying the Fraunhofer Institute. So my argument here is the new Artificial Intelligence Center should not be like, in general, the Italian Institute of Technology. I mean, I don't want to criticize that, but that is more academic. We really need to create an organization that is able to do knowledge transfer and link to SMEs, not large companies. And it's not easy to link SMEs if SMEs does not have competences. So the bottleneck of the economic success, of the economic impact in Torino and in the region of this center will not be the number of papers published, the number of patents published, but will be the ability to become really a translation organization, able to talk to SMEs, able to link with SMEs, and able to do the translatory work. So SMEs have a low absorptive capacity. And that's clear. That's clear from the data of BEP. Again, very low tertiary education in this region. So let's hire more engineers. It's difficult to produce engineers. Actually, in Italy, we produce far too many lawyers. To produce an engineer does not mean 5 years of training or 3 years of training in the BA, but means changing the culture at elementary school, creating support for the love of mathematics, not only for the love of Greece, Latin, and history. So creating incentives for young girl, especially, but also young boy, to go on studying mathematics. So the discontinuity there is evidence, elementary, tertiary school. So the solution cannot be anything else than supporting the Istituti Tecnici Superiori. Istituti Tecnici Superiori is education tertiary level. I'm explaining what it is because still a lot of people do not know them. There has been an attempt to create them in the middle 80s, and then finally in 2010 were created. 30 years it took to create this tertiary education, technical tertiary education in Italy. And they're doing their job, but they're very small. There are very few students. Here I just want to spend 30 seconds to tell, probably, I don't have hard evidence, but the industrial success of Italy after the Second World War is also associated to high quality secondary technical education. But that kind of education was not enough after the 70s fundamentally, and Italy had not been able to enter, like in Germany, for example, with the Fachhochschulen, in tertiary education. So I really think that Torino, Piemonte, Italy more in general, would gain a lot from supporting more istituti tecnici superiori, especially in this case in digital manufacturing, so artificial intelligence, but not only sensor robots and information data. If I had time, I would argue for a repository for co-location. I see my time is almost over. And here is the point that these organizations are partially financed by the government, the region, and partially financed by companies. And there is a need of creating awareness of companies and awareness of students. Every year, I start my class at the university and I ask my student, what are istituti tecnici superiori? In the last 4 years, no single university student in my class, 30, 40 students, knew what they were. So there is really a lack of diffusion of information. Last slide to close on related diversification and giving you an example. The argument I would make here is diversification is important, but you can't jump from your core competencies in, let's call it hard machinery manufacturing to do biotechnological firm, to do, God knows, banking or whatever you want. History matter, path dependency is there. Heritage matter, culture matter, okay? However, you may think the concept of related diversification. There are competencies, and now is an opening that the digital manufacturing, the digitalization offers that are typical of hard manufacturing, but could also be used, could also be diffused in other industrial areas. So let me give you the example of a potential convergence between bio-health-related knowledge and manufacturing capabilities. Actually, the example is actually BEPED, the job at the technology transfer or spin-off center at the Polytechnic. A lot of those companies are in biomedical, they're not in hard polytechnical subject. So another example is the XGM Research Center in Torino, located on the campus of the Politecnico, that arrived in Torino about, 15, 18 years ago for the competencies in digital engine, in diesel engine. The question is why they're still here. GM has sold everything in Europe. The center is still here. Interviews of 18 months ago, so I don't know if today is still exactly like that because it's been sold. But 18 months ago, the argument there was we have competencies in manufacturing, in sensoring, in measurement, the diesel, the sensor. There are competencies in this city on biohealth related. The car of the future will be a place where you test humans. So the interaction between typical competences and technology and knowledge of automobile-related industry that goes in the direction of health check and so on and so forth. So the hybridization and the development together, so the convergence. And fundamentally, a positive note, if La Città della Salute will not become only a building exercise, I'm closing, and that will be the platform for the convergence of all core competencies and offering new future competencies. And I think the Polytechnic and the Unito collaboration is a cornerstone for this development. Thank you very much.
Aldo, sorry for interrupting, but we are running a little bit late. I suggest the following while we move to the first of our external discussant and then speaker. If any of you have some question, also in the audience, please feel free to write them so we can filter and organize them. And so in the next slot for question, we are already prepared. So if Maria Savona is ready, okay, I can see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Marco. I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay, just
sorry, I just share.
Share everything and then go on PowerPoint.
Share.
Okay.
I hope you can you see that?
Perfectly. Just gone full screen, and I leave the floor to you.
Okay, so it should be here, I think. Can you see that?
Great, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks a lot. I mean, I really enjoyed the first two presentations, and I think my role here is to bring it a bit more general, because I'm not really expert on Turing, but I think I'm gonna discuss. If you can, you still hear me? Okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think what's the perspective I would like to bring into the discussion is a little bit talking about policy. So, what is the strategy that can lead to the future of Turing, assuming that there is some space to make Turing more smart? And the reason why I have this title is that in terms of policy, a lot, a huge dominance of policy thought has been this formula of smart specialization. So I'm going to reprise this from a different perspective, from a sort of devil's advocate perspective, trying to understand whether and to what extent Turing and Piedmont have the need to a smart specialization policy. So I'm going to go through 3 points. So what is a smart region, and what is, by contrast, a dumb region, and whether this is something that has been probably overused with not much context. And then I'm going to bring forward a couple of cases of smart regions to compare with Turing, and trying to see whether there is any benchmark to follow and so on. And then I will trying to propose a broad strategy of for Turing to recreate, if there's any need. I mean, from the previous presentation, probably not, some sort of smartness if there is the need for diversification. So these are my main points. Now, the idea is, what is really what is smart versus dumb in terms of policy of diversification? And ideally, if we go back to the initial point of how to base a smart specialization strategy on, is an entrepreneurial process of discovering promising areas, so mainly based on research and innovation, public policy should therefore facilitate entrepreneurs willing to engage in a discovery process, and this is to support sort of the star entrepreneurs that want to locate in a particular areas. And ideally, linking also with what Aldo was saying, ideally the smart specialization in this context would be to lead to general purpose technology specialized region, or even support following regions in artificial intelligence and ICT. So those supporting policy that allow this region to specialize in general purpose technology application. Now, by contrast, then a dumb policy for smart specialization would be a traditional industrial policy, a top-down one, or horizontal spread subsidies to favor imitation of regions specialized in high-tech sectors. Or, and I think this is something that relates a little bit to this specific case, whether it's being nostalgic about good core manufacturing sectors, in this specific case, car manufacturing, is the right strategy, and possibly not. But the idea is to articulate something alternative. So let's go back again to this sort of contrast between what is leading to a smart specialization versus moving away from a dumb specialization, if you want. Again, if we go to the classics, the main seminal authors related to smart specialization, the idea would be supplying incentives to encourage entrepreneurs. So ideally it would be to attract talents, to understand what you can do in a particular region based on what you have. But ideally, for example, if we think about it, traditional or declining regions in all the mature manufacturing or a mining, then ideally the question would be, what shall an entrepreneurial start do with €1 billion of R&D or tax credit, for instance, to in a mining peripheral region? Or, for example, if we think that, as the smart specialization was talking about, in terms of policy, you need to evaluate and assess effectiveness so that the support of a particular line of capabilities formation would be not discontinued too soon or not continued so long that subsidies are wasted. And ideally, the question that is raised by this is, in terms of policy again, who is able to assess the too soon or too long when pumping R&D into a particular regions? So I guess, again, the slogan of promoting general purpose technology networks is raise the question of whether probably, for example, opening an Airbnb booking website which is based on a platform really represent the sort of kind of innovation we want to drive towards smart specialization. So ideally, having given this, and I reprise what Aldo was mentioning, ideally we need to start from history, and he did it brilliantly in the previous presentation, because we want to understand what kind of policy support, for example, if we focus on R&D, what it means to support R&D and innovation in a region like Piedmont or Turin. So history matters not only in terms of hysteresis of industrial structure, but also in terms of skill composition and local skill complementarities, which probably, Frank, we're going to discuss a bit later. So ideally, we need to realize that policy supporting R&D might have an extremely different effect if you support it in regions like Cambridge, UK, or Palo Alto, US, or Emilia, vis-a-vis regions like Selby in Yorkshire or Dalton in the US and Basilicata in Italy. So again, similarly, the entrepreneurial spirit that is at the base of this smart specialization issue is going to be probably most likely very different in high-tech regions vis-a-vis peripheral one. So I'm not suggesting that Turin is a peripheral one, but then the idea is trying to understand how to move towards this sort of benchmark where you can actually promote policy that has the maximum effect. So, and this is something that I'm going to quote from the UK, and this is one of the cornerstone of the industrial strategy, the famous Northern Powerhouse. So how to build, the question is how to build on existing smartness or move away from existing dumbness. In other words, how do you reconvert a region like Northern in the UK in terms towards more smartness? And this is something that is, I think, an exemplification of the question that also citizens are posing. Like, does that mean that we can reopen the mines now? And this is the main challenge of policy. And this is not trivial, because ideally, what does it mean to build on existing structure? So I'm going to present a couple of cases that I would like to share with you that probably, possibly, hopefully are going to spark some discussion in comparison with Turin. So one is, well, my sort of adopted home city, which is in Brighton. There is a whole project that colleagues in SPRU have profusely devoted to the Brighton Creative Digital IT Cluster. Now, note that this is the link to the report, and I can share it whenever you want. What they found is basically Brighton is called the Silicon Beach. I mean, probably overestimating, but ideally what they found is that the formation of this creative digital cluster has been dramatically job friendly, with a two-digit growth of firms and employment up to a few years ago. They found out that all the small and medium digital firms and creative firms locating in there were coming from entrepreneurs fundamentally interdisciplinary. So there were not only STEM graduates, but also graduates in arts and humanities and design, which is interesting, I think, for the specific case of Turin, because they were fusing hard technological skills, like the Istituto Tecnico that Aldo was mentioning, with soft and creative artistic skills. Now, most of them were migrants. They have been attracted to Brighton more sort of hippie, hipster lifestyle and culture and creative reputation. London closeness was of help, obviously. But ideally, this particular growth has been virtually with no policy support. I mean, no sort of explicit, let's say, policy support. So this has been so successful that ideally, and also the finding of this report, that the UK industrial strategy following in the following years has been having a whole sector deal based on creative industries. And this is something that is particularly interesting in here. And please bear in mind that also Brighton hasn't got any, or the cluster of the southeast of England hasn't got any base or industrial base. So this is something that I think for Turin and Piedmont might be even a plus, because you can construct on a transformation along based on technological skills that are already there. Another case that I wanted to put forward, and this is based on a report that we did for the OECD in the aftermath of the earthquake in Abruzzo, another example of policies that regional policy that should help peripheral region, or in that particular case, not only peripheral, but also hit by natural disaster. And for example, if we take the case of Abruzzo, which we explore in that particular report, it was already a declining region, but the industrial base in Abruzzo was quite extensive. Although in general there were lack of firms connectivity and the dominance of micro and small firms. And ideally, Abruzzo had also, prior to the earthquake, a high risk of capital and human capital leakages, as well as low capacity to compete for skill retention due to the closeness to Rome. So what we suggested, I mean, in terms of we constructed a whole regional strategy to turn smart, I mean, to borrow from this smart specialization slogan, to trying to build on the initial strength. I mean, Abruzzo had a sound and diversified manufacturing base with some automotive, electronics, and so on, but also an abundant natural, cultural, and artistic resources. And I think, compare with Abruzzo, Piedmont has, and Turin has much more. And ideally, for example, now there is a great hope in the localization of the Gran Sasso Science Institute as a center of excellence, in addition to the existing universities. So ideally, there is some form of potential that, I mean, the problem here is that we need to sort of unpack what is a smart specialization strategy for Abruzzo and for Piedmont and Turin. And the cases that I have given, they're sort of different, because ideally one was based to reconstruct an already declining regions towards a little bit more smartness. The first one was sort of based on existing strengths, but were much less than what Piedmont might claim. So what would be a smart strategy in terms of reconfiguration of Turin? I mean, I'm an old-fashioned economist, so probably what we would need to do is start with revisiting the classics and getting a sense of what Marshall Holy Trinity was, in terms of industrial atmosphere and labor market and the presence of local consumers and supply markets that are conducive of development. And I'm also, again, an old-fashioned economist, and I really believe in this idea of having sort of the potential for Hirschman backward and forward linkages. In other words, when you have sectors or a sectoral base that is conducive of more development, then you're already best placed to diversify. And this, I think, is the case for Turin. The point is where. The point is what direction you need to probably follow. So if we all agree that we need to start from the existing specialization advantage or even disadvantage, then ideally you will need to sort of operate towards what we call integrated policy platforms. In other words, sort of trying to integrate knowledge bases that are existing, but are also to be formed. So not only science, engineering, but also based on design and arts and humanities. And ideally, I'm going to get back to the bottom-up or top-down models of governance, because I think this is also a crucial important factor. So that's the point. I mean, the point is, if I want to bring my own work on this, and based on what I've been discussing so far, the question is, what could be a sort of smart specialization strategy for Turin and Piedmont? And my work, for example, what Marco was mentioning in the beginning, is not all the industrializations are actually bad if you deindustrialize in something that is an extension or a qualification of existing manufacturing bases. And ideally, over the past decades, my work has looked at the two questions: does specializing in KIBS and knowledge-intensive business services entail really the industrialization? Can we exploit this transformation of the core manufacturing bases into something that is more that can be conducive of high regional development? And in this particular case, I think Turin is quite well placed, because it has a highly sophisticated potential demand for KIBS coming from the manufacturing core. KIBS can be quite knowledge intensive, so that they can be conducive of upgrading of the skill based and on the sort of industrial atmosphere, if we go back to Marshall. But they don't even spend too much in R&D. So ideally, KIBS are not footloose, and they are very much linked to the manufacturing basis. And what I think I'm advocating here is trying to argue that Turin has a great potential to fit any local development theory, focus on the inducement mechanism coming from the dear old high linkage sector. So you have a core based on high-tech manufacturing. You could ideally move towards which you have already done, KIBS, but also moving a step forward and trying to exploit the role of knowledge-intensive business services to create a cognitive and proximate creative cluster, which can go to digital arts and creative industries. Now, I take Aldo's point that this might be not enough to eat, but then again, if we take the point that, I mean, the cases of the southeast of London, there has been a lot to eat, and with much less than Turin has. So ideally, if the sort of positive externalities of this is to rejuvenate as a region that is basically a core manufacturing base, but also from the sort of social tissue. So I will probably put forward the sort of final point that I had here. I hope I haven't gone through much over time. So ideally, what I've been arguing is if we want to revisit this notion of smart specialization, assuming that this is the right way of going forward to transform the industrial base of Turin and Piedmont, the entrepreneurial discovery is important, but is certainly not the only part of the story. So we need to act in terms of policy. And ideally, history matters. So ideally, it's true, we need to start from the existing sectoral advantages, even the declining ones. And ideally, if we reason in terms of Hirschman linkages, then or high development linkages, then there is the potential for rejuvenating this manufacturing, perhaps towards AI. I mean, the AI digital one that Aldo was mentioning, but also in general to construct a regional advantage that starts from there. And ideally, what I'm trying to argue is that you can actually favor more interdisciplinary skills, like on the, to complement the traditional STEM sort of human capital with arts and humanities that are able to reconfigure also the role of KIBS within the region. So ideally, this is something that can be possibly a direction, and it doesn't need to recreate completely, so to change a complete specialization of a region, but to build on the existing one towards something that can be more, for example, more employment friendly. Now, the caveat that I have in here, and this is something that I've been taking, for example, from my colleagues at LSE. So Andres Rodriguez Poses has talked at length about the geography of discontent. And I think this is something that is very much related to the sort of potential for creating an industrial specialization that is job friendly. So smart specialization should be understood in terms of what the so-called place-sensitive distributed policy. So to make sure that whatever areas of which is left behind is actually reintroduced as a policy target. And ideally also from the political perspective, I think that something that I'd like to point in any sort of policy sort of the future of work, in other words, something that might be more precarious, might be less traditional, might be less protected, then it's important to make sure that that you reform the labor markets to make sure that these new jobs are supported and protected. And this has to do with what Trajectories has called the democratization of expectations. So whatever policy you put forward to transform regions, you need to make sure that the civil societies and all parts of the society are involved. And I think I will stop here, and I'm glad to. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Hi, thank you very much, Maria. Was really interesting. We are collecting questions. I think if Frank is available, we will go on with Frank's presentation, and we'll keep on collecting questions, so to have some of them for the floor discussion at the end. How are you, Frank?
Yes, I'm doing fine.
Okay, so thank you for being here. I leave you the floor. The next 20 minutes are all yours. So we're looking forward.
Fantastic. And you will share the slides, right?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be part of this discussion. I have to apologize. I do not know much about the economy of Turin, and I was very glad to see that the other speakers actually could fill in a lot of my questions that I would have had about what the economy looks like and where it came from. The historical perspective and the richness of the description has been tremendous. So I've very much enjoyed that. So what I instead will try to do is to give you a sense of regional growth and particular regional diversification. So
wait
I'm working.
Sorry, I'm not sure the people are seeing the slide.
I saw the slides, yes, but now they are.
It's all right.
Yes.
But you went out of the full screen. So if you can get back to full screen, great. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'm working with a team at the Growth Lab at the Harvard Kennedy School, and our question is, how do economies grow? And in particular, how do you get places on new growth paths? So let's move to the next slide. So this is a slide from a fantastic paper by Danny Roderick called Premature Deindustrialization. And it's basically showing you that manufacturing is not what it used to be. So manufacturing throughout history has been a stepping stone for poor countries to start a development process. So what you see here is three graphs. It's the share of the economy that's going to manufacturing in terms of employment in blue, and in terms of value added. One's in nominal terms in red, and one's in real terms in green. And what you see on the horizontal axis is the income per capita of a country. So poor countries to the left typically have a very low manufacturing share, but that goes up, and the employment in manufacturing as a share of the economy peaks at around $6,000 US. So it peaks at a relatively low income level. And after that, it goes down because these economies typically move on to more services-oriented activities. So we can go to the next slide now. Well, one thing that Danny Roderick argues is that manufacturing is actually not a stepping stone anymore that it used to be. So this graph shows you on the horizontal axis the income level at which manufacturing peaked in an economy, and on the vertical axis the share of employment that was in manufacturing at this peak. So as you see, the early industrializers like Great Britain and many of the European countries, they peaked at a very high level of income. Manufacturing peaked at a very high level of income at a very high level. So the UK had over 30% of its employment in manufacturing at its peak. Compare that to late industrializers like India. The peak is way earlier in the development process at a much lower income per capita, and it's also it peaks at a much lower level. So India didn't go over much more than 12 to 13% of its employment going to manufacturing when it peaked and started moving out of manufacturing again. Now, the last thing that I want to share about this manufacturing, that it's not what it used to be, is this graph, which shows you basically for the rich countries in the world, how the manufacturing employment decline that they went through, who was actually hit by that. And as you see, most of the decline in manufacturing actually was in low-skill employment. Then from the early 2000s, medium-skill employment starts dropping a little bit. But what has improved over time is the employment share of manufacturing of high-skill employment. So manufacturing is not what it used to be, and particularly for the lower-skilled workers. Yes, we can go to the next slide. So what that suggests is that what we need to do is we need to understand how you actually can move on to new growth paths. So what we need to understand is how does an economy's industry mix actually work, and what does it look like? And this is something that we worked on for quite a while at the Growth Lab. So the most important thing is that we need to understand how industries are connected to one another. So you want to know how industries are related. One of the earliest attempts to do that is in a paper by Cesar Hidalgo and Ricardo Hausmann and some co-authors, where they basically infer capabilities from trade patterns. So the idea is that if to export a product, countries need all of the capabilities that the product requires. And if capabilities are expensive to maintain, countries will economize on them, so they will reuse their capabilities in as many products as you can. So therefore, if you see that products are very often exported by the same countries, they're likely to have similar capability requirements. So you can basically infer how similar the capability requirements of two products or industries are by looking at which products or industries co-occur in the production baskets of countries or cities or regions. It allows you to create a network of the economy, which is shown on the next slide. So this shows you each node in this network is a product or an industry, and they're connected if we invert that the industries share a lot of capabilities from the fact that they very often co-occur. So this is a modern version of that map. The authors called this a product space. So on the right, you see in green, you see textiles. Then in the middle, you have in red some construction products, machinery in dark blue, light blue is electronics, purple is chemicals. So this gives you a map of what an economy is doing, but it does so in a sense that you get a feeling for which types of capabilities do these economies actually dispose of. And that allows you to map an economy on this space. So this is, for instance, Japan in 2018. You see that Japan's skill base or capability base is mostly in machinery, but also in electronics and in chemicals. So if you compare that to Italy on the next slide, you see that Italy has quite a bit of the same specialization in manufacturing, not as much in electronics, but instead it has some of the more traditional industries like food and textiles and footwear. If you then again compare, and there's the car parts, what Turin, one of the things that Turin adds to this export basket. So if you then look at Greece, again, a completely different export basket, focused mostly on food and basic metals and a very strong specialization in olive oil. So Greece actually is in a very different capability, has a very different set of capabilities than Italy. And that's what you can see in these kind of graphs. Now, these graphs are not just nice to depict an economy, they also help predict how economies grow. So here you see basically the main graph of this paper by Hidalgo et al., which on the horizontal axis shows you how close a product is to all of the products that the country is already exporting in terms of this network, this product space. And on the vertical axis, you see the likelihood that that product will be produced within the next 5 years. So the more related activities exist in the economy, the more likely it is that an economy diversifies into this product. Yes, we can move to the next slide. So, and this finding actually of related diversification has been replicated across so many different areas of application that it has been dubbed the principle of relatedness. So these three graphs show you basically that the same happens not only if you look at exports of countries, but also industries in regions, innovation in regions, so by the technologies that are patented, and even the fields in which the scientists, the academic scientists in a city publish, also that follows a path of related diversification. So related diversification is something that is very pervasive, and regions typically diversify into new activities that are closely related to their current activities. But that is not to say that this is optimal. So, and that's what we have been talking about all day already. If the activities that are closely related to what you do now are not growing, are actually in decline, you somehow need to figure out how you can do something that is hard, apparently that is that regions typically don't do very easily, to move into unrelated activities, to make long jumps in these networks. So another way to create these maps is basically to take a human capital lens, because many of the capabilities of a region are actually embedded in the skills of its labor force. The way you can do this is by looking at which industries share a lot of their workers. So you can take something like a big data set, a social security data set, and you can follow how people move in that economy from one industry to the next. And if two industries have large labor flows between them, then you can infer that the skills that these two industries are using must be similar. And that creates a very similar map to this product space, just that it now also includes services. So before we only had like the blue part, the manufacturing part, but now we also have all of the other kind of activities in the economy. And this is predictive of regional diversification. It predicts also how firms will diversify. We use this space to look at the Saarland in Germany. So the Saarland is famous for its old manufacturing base. This is one of these actually very pretty steel mills that are still around. They're UNESCO heritage. But although they attract some tourists, they definitely don't generate the amount of economic activity that they did before. So the Saarland wanted to know how they can actually diversify away from this. A story very similar to Turin. And they had the same idea, that they were good at machinery, particularly they actually supplied a lot of the car parts to Stuttgart, which is quite nearby. And they had a capability base in the universities in software and IT. So they thought, how do they connect to one another? So we looked at that by analyzing basically what are the industries that are closely related to car manufacturing and what are the industries that are closely related to software. So this is the car industry, the cluster of the car industry. And as you see, it's all blue. I apologize for the German labels. They're all basically heavy machinery with some links to orange, which is R&D in natural sciences and some other related activities. So the car industry is actually not connected to the software industry. This is the software industry. The software industry is connected to some manufacturing activities, but mostly to measurement devices and to pharmaceuticals. It's also connected to the universities, which are here in brown. Sorry, the labels are very small, but the brown note is research centers and universities. And it's connected to a bunch of business services. So there is no natural connection between this old industry and the skill base of that old industry and the skill base of the software industry that are supposed to create these new combinations that we have heard about earlier today. So this is a challenge, and you somehow need to figure out how to make those connections. They will not necessarily emerge without some kind of strategy. So we can move to the next slide here. So how do you actually break these development paths that you're on? If you're in an old industrial region, how can you actually move to new activities? So to study that, we looked in Sweden, and we looked at all of the new establishments that were set up in Sweden, and we asked, where are they set up? Are they set up in industries that are more or less related to the economy than the economy is to itself? So if these new plants are set up in industries that are more related to the economy, then they basically reinforce what is already there, and they don't create novelty. If they are on the left of this graph, and they're created in industries that are less related to the economy than the economy is to itself, then they create novelty. They basically induce structural transformation. So we split these plants into two types. The types that were set up by firms, so these are basically new branch plants of existing firms, and the ones that were set up by entrepreneurs. And as you can see, as expected by many, entrepreneurs actually create more novelty than existing firms do. But when you split these plants further into the plants that were set up by local firms and non-local firms, or by local entrepreneurs and non-local entrepreneurs, what you see is that the local firms basically just reinforce what is already there, but the non-local firms, they create actually substantial amount of novelty, and the non-local entrepreneurs also create more novelty than the local entrepreneurs. So that is when they're set up. But what happens 10 years later if you go back to the region and you ask how much of the novelty that they created is still there? And then what you see is that the non-local firms are actually in the long run the ones that in Sweden created most of the novelty, most of the structural transformation. So we can move to the next slide. So if actors from outside the region, but still from within Sweden, if they bring new types of activities to the region, it stands to reason that foreign companies might be even more potent structural transformation. So this is we looked at innovation activities across the world. And this is the map of innovation in 1975, and the next map will show the most innovative regions in 2012. And what you see is that basically regions that were very innovative in 1975 also are still very innovative in 2012. But there are some new regions that emerged, mostly in East Asia, South Asia, some in Eastern Europe. And the question of this paper was, how did they do that? How did they actually manage to very quickly climb the ladder of technological excellence? And what we were thinking about was this case that we observed in the data in Bangalore. So Bangalore, until 1990, had basically no activity, no innovation activity in IT. And then there is this blip in 1989. It's a patent that is owned by Hewlett-Packard, but it was invented with local inventors in Bangalore. So after Hewlett-Packard came into Bangalore and started inventing there, set up a research lab, all of a sudden things start taking off. And Bangalore, of course, now is one of the main IT centers in the world. What we wanted to know, is this actually something that is in general true? So what we did is, we took all of the regions in the world in which a foreign firm started patenting for the first time with local inventors. And then we took another region that looked very similar to that region, but where no foreign firm came in. And you see, before this treatment with the foreign firm, these two regions are very similar, right? So the graph shows the difference in innovation output between the treated region and the counterfactual region. After this foreign firm comes in, you all of a sudden see a large increase in patenting in the region where this foreign firm came. Now, what we wanted to know is there a difference between this impact on the region depending on the type of foreign firm that you attracted? And we divided basically very simple the firms into bottom 80% multinationals and top 5% multinationals. So mind you, these bottom 80% multinationals, they're still technology companies that go abroad. So they're not incapable firms. But to our surprise, we saw that these firms actually create a lot of spillovers to the region. So the effect on the regional innovation output by local firms was much higher than that of the top 5% firms, which is in the next graph. So in fact, the top technology companies in the world, when they went abroad, they actually didn't create any spillovers. So think of the Googles and the Apples and so on. They didn't create any spillovers. So what was happening? So first of all, these top performers, they went to less developed regions. They didn't engage in any local alliances. They relied very little on the local labor market to get inventors. They actually took the inventors from their headquarters. And they also didn't get cited by local firms. So these top firms, they didn't get embedded in the region, whereas the bottom 80% of the distribution of these M&Es did get embedded in the region. And we think that's basically because the top 5% firms, they have a lot to lose when they go to a region, and they have very little to gain. So if there are spillovers, they will be creating them. They will not be absorbing them. So that brings us to a second observation. Long jumps typically require a region to connect to other regions and to attract capable firms and workers from there, but not necessarily the flagship R&D that is very, the flagship FDI that is very expensive in terms of incentives to attract. It might actually be better to get the somewhat lower tech companies, the M&Es. the smaller, medium-sized MNEs. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is this idea that skills are actually not just an individual quality. So if you think about making a car, you don't just need car engineers. You actually need this entire list of specialists that are listed here, which are the 162 occupations that the BLS says working car manufacturing. If you have skills, you actually need other people. If you're a very specialized person, you need other people to complement your specialization for you to become effective. So a region shouldn't just create higher educated workers. It actually needs to create a full ecosystem of diversified skills. So the conclusions, they basically took over. So I'll get to them now. Mainly, a region it is smart to build on your existing strengths because that's easiest, but it might not always be optimal. And if you need to break the path of the development path, the growth path on which you are now, then very often it helps looking abroad and looking to other regions and other places, attract the workers and firms from there. Now, a second thing that I think is very important is that human capital is not an individual characteristic. So the problem is that skills only become valuable if there's an entire ecosystem of skills around them. So what you basically need to do is you need to transition this ecosystem, because if you just create one type of specialization in a region, if it's not complemented by the others, it will not become effective, and it just is very expensive to do so. It will not have a payoff. Now, the last thing that I think is important to highlight is that firms can help you with this, but they have their own agenda. So the flagship foreign investments do not necessarily benefit the region most, because they don't need to become embedded in the local innovation system. They have their own internal capabilities. So it is probably better to look for somewhat smaller and medium-sized firms instead of the top players, because they have more incentives to actually interact with your capability base and to make connections to the local economy. Local collaborations are in general helpful, but firms will balance this with their competitive position. So firms do not like to leak knowledge to their competitors. So if you're looking for crossovers, it actually helps to find crossovers in places between firms that are not direct competitors. And the last thing is that training and skill formation ideally reflect the needs of the region, but not of a single firm. Because then people become so specialized that they're actually only useful for that one firm. So instead, it's better to find a consortium of firms that are in related activities, so in skill-related activities where they require similar types of workers, and get them to together put forward an education program that generates somewhat like semi-specialized skills. So they are specialized in a particular type of capability, but they're not so specialized that they would be locked into any one particular industry or firm. They could still be widely shared across the firms in the economy. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I hope there's still some time for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm not sure if you can see me. Yes, and Marco is also there. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting, and thanks for the conclusion as well of the four presentation. We have collected some questions that we want to pose to all the speakers. And we have here in the chat. I wonder also if the four of you will appear. Thank you. And Maria as well. Thank you very much. Okay, I think Marco has got some problem, but maybe he can.
I'm here, so I was trying to reappear, but apparently the moderator turned me off definitely, but it's fine.
Okay.
Yes,
please.
Yes, I was collecting some all the questions together with your organizer and also some points. All your presentation were full of insights, but something that struck me was that almost all of you in different ways pointed at the importance of skills at the human level. So in a way, we need to think how to restructure the economy, but at the end, we need people to do that. And so we have to learn how to think, to develop these skills, to mix these skills in teams. And also, as pointed out by Frank and by Aldo, how can we attract people and their skills from abroad, either as a standing worker or as companies moving in town. I don't know how Turin has been successful in doing that, in attracting, not only in leveraging its own skills and competence, but in attracting new people and firms. So I would like to refer to some question also connected to this. One very interesting question is pointing at the competition between cities. We cannot, all cities cannot be the richest city in the world, not even above average. And also the thing that, as Aldo mentioned, near Turin, there is Milan, which to some extent could be more attractive for foreign investment. This could be a problem. And also, I think Maria was also suggesting this idea of moving towards some sectors and to do that, to leverage of local externalities, going back to Marshall. But maybe another question was suggesting, is there a risk that we make efforts to develop externalities and then the nearby city appropriate the externalities that we created? So maybe feel free to discuss whatever you like, but maybe I would like to challenge you a little bit on this issue. So the role of skills in the individual level, not only the macro structure, how can we attract from before, and the risk of other competing cities, Milano because it's the neighbor, but not only. So maybe if Patrizia, if you want to add something, otherwise I would leave 5 minutes to each expert.
Yes, thanks. I agree completely on focusing on competencies and skills, but also about the concept of ecosystem is quite fundamental, which I would like to explore more, and some of the question also has highlighted this. So maybe we can make this roundtable. Thanks.
So we can start. Yes, from maybe Aldo has got also specific questions that have been connected with his speech. So we can start from him, maybe.
Thank you. Maybe why don't we start with the two guests, and then if there is the time, I can answer to my specific question or comment. So if you agree, I'm changing the order as my usual.
Okay, so let's change the order. Just Frank, just speak. Let's Frank rest for a second, and let's see if Maria has some news or ideas about these issues.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, this is a very interesting question. I mean, and I guess the interesting thing from all presentation is that we all seem to agree on the fact that we need to build on existing capabilities and ideally transform it in some way or another through attracting talent from abroad or to attracting talent from close regions, or to transform it in a way that is based on complementary skills and so on. The question on competition is extremely interesting, because I think there's there are, I mean, if you really build on your own unicity, I think there is some space for avoid a detrimental competition and actually build up on what could be, again, a Marshallian sort of story. I mean, if you think about it, for example, the case of Brighton, what could be the highest competition? Could be London, obviously, but in that particular case, it wasn't such a competition, or maybe it's the other way around. The London effect has actually created more opportunities for developing a cluster, a creative cluster that then became a successful story. So translated to Turin, this can be more like, why don't you actually exploit the closeness to Milan rather than being threatened, and actually build up on a specificity of Turin, which, as I was trying to argue, can also build on transform it or complement hard technological skills with something related to arts and humanities, or more of a wider portfolio of skills, and build your own transformation. So to reverse the story, rather than being a competitive effect of Milan appropriating talents, you actually build up on something that comes from there because it's close. And this goes back to my holy Marshallian trinity. I don't know, this is just a suggestion, but I guess I'm sure all the other speakers have other interesting points.
Frank, do you have any comments on that? I mean, it would be. I think it was very interesting. You pointing at this need to get the right firms and the right people from abroad or from other area to create something new. Do you have any thought about how this can be made? Are there policies that could be put in places to do that?
So I think that the most important thing is that these skills, they actually don't live in isolation. If you educate fantastic car engineers, but you don't get the designers, the people who can sell a car, the people who actually have the technical skills to put the car together, then these engineering skills are actually not that valuable, and they will leave because they will go to where they do find that ecosystem. So when you think about education, you need to understand the skills that you're offering in a place as an ecosystem. And there are many stakeholders in that ecosystem: the universities, the technical schools, the other types of education that you have, but also the firms that do part of that training. So it's not an easy task to do, but I think it helps to view like the returns to education, if you're talking about that. To stop thinking of that as being your private return to a college degree, because your college degree creates complementarities for other people in your economy, and that creates all kinds of spillovers as well. So education in general is an externality-rich phenomenon, and that links a little bit to the discussion about competition between cities. I know a pitch for more Europe is maybe not well timed anymore. But if you think about how education works and how it's funded locally by regions in some countries, and then it's funded at the national level. And then once young people are fully educated, they move. And they move to other places that never paid with their tax, euros, tax pounds, or tax dollars for these fully educated people, but they do get their labor and the spillovers these people create. So that suggests that there are all kinds of hidden transfers in the system of education from the very local level where the high schools are being locally funded to the national level where the universities are funded and so on. So I think those two aspects of externalities that have to do with the education system are very important, and that points to problems that live both in an area with a lot of interested actors, but also at different spatial scales where you will have to coordinate.
The view of the internal expert, Aldo and Beppe.
Okay, I'm trying to answer to a specific question I've received and then tie to the rest of the discussion. And more exactly, the specific question was about the center, the competence center that I told was created in Torino as the organization to manage the governance of knowledge transfer. My answer to this question is no, and I will argue why. I mean, he's doing part of the job, but that competence center is, I think, by its construction, more oriented to engineering and mechanical kind of background rather than soft. The argument behind my presentation is that, and in line with Frank somehow and Maria, that you need the hard and the soft, and Torino is good in hard, but is less good in soft, if you want. So why do we need a new center coordinating and being involved in artificial intelligence? Because it might be a pole of attraction, actually. So to link it to the other discussion, a pole of attraction, Maria used the word rejuvenate. This is definitely, if you look at the mean age of this city, we need the rejuvenation in this city. Milano is sucking young people, we don't. So the software area is an option for rejuvenate in the sense that artificial intelligence is orthogonal, is a GPT, we say in academia. It's a general purpose technology, if you want. Will contribute to manufacturing in auto, but will contribute to cartoon design linked to the old small cluster. We had the old small cluster of games in Torino too. So the idea of asking to the Artificial Intelligence Center not to act as a research center, but to act as something broader, has to do to the fact that we really need to attract in this city younger people, younger company, foreigners. We need to break the lock-in that this city has been living successfully, but not any longer, in traditional manufacturing. And that's why my argument is the knowledge transfer has to go there, because that's the new part that we need to support and incentivize, and has to be across area, has not to be in the traditional, but has to reach out to the related. In Frank jargon, related diversification is difficult. If you want to push towards medical, if you want to push towards games, if you want to push towards environment. I did not have time here to argue about the environment. I think it is another possibility. And so I do see artificial intelligence as orthogonal. And if you want, also sexier than engineering to attract young people and young talent around here. So rather than the traditional competence center, I think the digital manufacturing is a more traditional engineering manufacturing competence center. And I really think that we need to base the response on the competence in manufacturing, but trying to go towards related, or the jump of Frank was citing, the jumping is always difficult. So creating a path that allows to reach out, however, towards new industries where growth is. That's it.
Thank you. Beppe, please share with you. You are the expert on the Torino innovative ecosystem. I think you can shed some light on this.
Yes, I'm talking a bit more in general terms, and then maybe I'll say something about Torino. I think that even from all the previous comments, or most of them, there is a common trait that this process of transformation cannot be fully endogenous, so just based on something that is internal to the region. There must be some type of connection with abroad. And in particular, it has been mentioned, I got results from my own research in this direction about the role of large firms, multinational enterprises, locating and doing this, contributing to this process of elaboration of new recombination of knowledge. And but we have to ask ourselves why this company choose one area and not another one. I think this is based on two factors. One is about the local skills in terms of new graduates, freshly graduated engineers or economists, all right. But then they also choose a sector based on the quality of the local supply chain they need. And in this case, we need to focus more on the concept of human capital rather than just the new skills right after the education. So in this direction, I believe it would be extremely important to activate this channel for attraction of multinational here to work simultaneously on having more resources in terms of new graduates in the right field of study, and at the same time supporting the what we call the upskilling within local SMEs, because the two goes together to some extent. We cannot just focus on making more engineers, because otherwise I believe it will be less effective in terms of capabilities of attraction. Some people were mentioning the competition with other cities. I see in my daily life a very strong competition, especially for in the area of new ventures, startups that move to other areas, also thanks to significant public policy initiatives for relocating their activities in other areas. So that's really an issue. Most of these really competitive areas are not, in my experience, in Italy. Probably most of them are abroad. We have to think, I believe, in the relationship with other areas like Milan, not in a positive way. That would be a disaster, I think. There are some sectors that have some type of spillovers. I mean, I'm talking about finance. Clearly, the concentration in finance is very high in Milan, and I don't expect anything to change in that sense. While in the case of some specific areas of manufacturing, I'm also talking, for example, in the area of aerospace, what I see is that there is room locally to play as an important actor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think it has been very fruitful. We are very short of time, but another question, another issue that we want to just pose is relating to the fact that we mentioned many times the concept of smartness and growth, but associated with this, there are also a number of contradictions and possible a different view relating to the crisis that from environmental viewpoint is really under our attention. So also is one of the participants highlighted the fact that we needed to be very careful in relation to what has been done in the past, and considering in a forward-looking situation the concept relating of a green manufacturing or a circular economy type of production and consumption. So I would like to understand a little bit more about this issue in relation to your experience, Frank and Maria, and in relation to Turin for closing in very few minutes. Thanks, each, if it's possible.
Maria, do you want to go first, or should I?
No, go ahead, Frank. We
Yeah,
made the order.
So I think this is it's a very important point. In terms of making an economy greener, there are so many aspects of that that it's hard to say for any particular city how to do that. But in general, I think many of the pollution-related issues are externalities, and they need to be priced, and there's no way around that. The other thing that does help, which is not pricing, is helped by the fact that many of the technologies that help us become greener are actually very young technologies that are on super rapid technological trajectories. So if you look at solar power compared to coal power, the price of electricity from solar is on an exponential decline. And there's something, many people know Moore's law, which means that every 2 years the number of transistors doubles on a chip. But in fact, there's also something called Wright's law. And there it's not that technologies improve with time, they improve with demand. And then in technologies like solar, we have seen that a country like Germany could create a massive demand for green energy that was very costly for the country, but created a huge acceleration of the technological progress in solar, particularly. And that's an externality to the rest of the world. So I think even even at the level of an economy of Germany has enough demand power to really move the needle on these young technologies and move them forward. So I think those are the two things that you can do. There's hope. Smallish interventions on a global scale can lead to massive improvements there. And the other thing is just price it. Price the pollution.
Prices, the externalities. Thank you. And Maria, just a few minutes to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a few words. I mean, Frank has already said it. I mean, ideally, if we tertiarize, if we move to something away, if we move away from manufacturing, we don't necessarily green the economy. So the one thing is surely, I mean, you release the constraint of pollution by innovating, and this is a general issue that is there. There's not much to do, and in terms of, but I also think that there's a lot can be done in terms of, if you want, at the macroeconomic level, when you decide redistributive policies. I mean, you green the economy by allowing people to buy green products, and if green products are more expensive, then nobody can afford it, and you never manage to do it. So there's a demand constraint a lot, and I think that one of the usually overlooked policy responses to green the economy is to allowing people to buy more green products, and that's usually a fact that needs to be reincorporated in the policy response to greening economy. And one, if I may, on an issue of sustainability, which is unrelated to greening the economy, is also, if you want, the extent to which we can create a sustainable region from a social perspective. And I think my plea to transform towards more of a moving to, for example, creative cluster and so on, is also that if you employ more diverse kind of skills and more diverse employment, you also allow society to become a bit more open-minded, and this can reverse the policy disaster and the political disaster that we are all witnessing. So I think more culture is good for everyone, and not only for the environment and for the industrial structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you touch a very crucial aspect of the human capital, how crucial it is for changing the world, and probably also the connection with the fact that we need to change also our accountability, a general term, because the GDP is a little bit very short term vision. But I will leave it to Aldo and Beppe to close the round table on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you again. A brief comment. I already started to talk about that during the presentation. I think Torino has a chance there of maybe saying something. And I quote again, Fiat is producing electric cars here. What a surprise. Oh, it was a strategic decision with the new agreement with Peugeot. I mean, it was not said. Second, we have the environmental center. That is, I think, an excellent organization that has played a significant role in the last 15 to 20 years and is evolving now from energy to more green in general. And third, I think the city itself has the dimension to be really seriously, not only COVID level, but as a strategic plan. We are speaking 2030, so it's 10 years from now. As a strategic plan, make it a green city, make it a smart, rather than smart specialization that I would argue somehow against, but a smart city, yes, is a possibility. If so, we have the old manufacturing there, that is the side of Fiat. We have the new environment research, that is the environmental, and we need the policy. We need the political will in this case of taking a challenge. And maybe in that case, a jump is feasible. It's a tricky possibility, but it's something that could pay back, because in any case, environmental sustainability is not going to disappear as priority, will become only bigger. So in a cynical economist's view, the demand there will be there and will increase. If not, the earth will disappear. And so potentially is a new industrial development area that is even combining social welfare. So we could get two targets in one, but there you need the political will to really make a difference in presenting this city. And that links to my general comment of a lack of capacity of the city. We had it a bit around the Olympics, of selling the city outward, abroad, but even in Italy. And that could be a nice alley to pursue. Torino, the new manufacturing, the new sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Beppe, your last few words, like launching the principle for Turin.
Aldo made a very good closing remarks. I'm adding a little on this just by saying that, at least in my view, the theme of environmental sustainability, circular economy can be a good lens to see one direction of recombination of the skills locally. Incentives in this field and regulation matters a lot. We know incentives of companies are not necessary in that direction, but national, international regulation will step by step induce more decision of investment. What is happening about the electric vehicles locally is probably something that will grow in the future, hopefully, even in other industries. What is very important in this case is being able to anticipate what will happen in maybe 10 years and be ready to be a good place for attracting investments of those companies from the outside of the city, maybe from the outside of the region, that are looking for good places for setting up their research centers in order to transform their businesses towards more sustainability, eco-compatibility. But I believe it's a good orientation for the development of the city.
Thank you very much, Beppe. I would like also to invite Marco, that has chaired all the session, to express his congratulations to all of you, and to my really sincere thank you for the very wonderful presentation, discussion. I think It is a first step toward the development of possible scenarios that we are going to discuss in the next few weeks with a roundtable multi-stakeholder discussion that follow our webinar. Marco, to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it was a lot of feed for thought, but also feed for food for thought, and also food for our ongoing process. So we get many insights, example from different cities, from UK to Germany, that I think it would be very useful to compare them. And we will keep you updated with our work if you like, both you speakers and also people that are still listening to us after 2 hours. So thank you very much, and I think we can close here this streaming. Thank you very much, Politecnico, Università di Torino, and all the organizers.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was a great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.